Professor Brain Brown's research shows that vulnerability fosters good emotional and mental health. It is a sign of courage. We become more resilient and brave when we embrace who we truly are and what we are feeling. The Vulnerable Scientist podcast is a space for scientists to tell their honest and authentic stories. I am your host, Sarah Nyakeri, who happens to be a scientist, informal science communicator, and I help scientists create personal websites. If you want to support this show, go to www.patreon.com/thevulnerable-scientist. You can also follow this podcast on all social media platforms at TV Scientist Pod. Electricity problems. Okay.
Same here. They're just gone now.
I hope your laptop has some juice left.
Yeah, it does. Luckily.
Okay. Sour. Okay. So so since I've lost some part of the recording, we'll have to go back a little bit.
Okay.
Just to capture what you had said before. And I think at that point you had already talked about your IPR, and you were talking about how it was going for a nature trail. Then I think I asked you after that, how was it like, looking for an internship. And also, I think I asked you, like, internship in both Cambry and also in IPR. How would you advise someone who wants to go into Cambry? And also, I think I asked you about if you're what is it? Okay, I'll remember, but it has something to do with you transitioning to do you are answering the question of how did you perform after your university education.
When I talked about getting my second class APA, and then now figuring out what I wanted to do after that, because already in my head, I had seen what my future would be like, and it would involve a lot of going back to school and pursuing my master's and my PhD. So that was a given for me. But the thing that was missing was, what master's do you want to do? What direction do you want to take your career in? And since that wasn't clear to me, that's when I decided to do now an extra internship, just to sort of go into the internship knowing already what I know from Cambry and where my passions are, and trying to figure out how I can sort of instill what I had learned and my passion into my future career, and how that links up to the masters that I plan to do. So that's when I joined IPR for close to a year before I figured out that I wanted to do my master's in bioinformatics. So I guess, should I answer the question about looking for internship?
Yes.
Okay. So it's never very easy looking for internships, and you have to be very intentional in the direction you want to take it in. So your focus should be, what are your interests, and this should be dictated by what did you find that triggered your or sparked your curiosity maybe in class. Let's say we're talking to an undergrad who hasn't really had much exposure. So you don't want to be very closed off in the direction you want your internship to go, because this is sort of an exploratory journey where you want to see to get hands-on experience on different things. So you don't want to be very closed off, but also your search should be very targeted in a way that you're looking for a place that is very active and a lot is going on, because you don't want to go to a place where not much work is being done, and at the end of the day you've just shown up and then left high and by. That's not your intention. Your intention is to get some exposure and actually know where your interests are and if they're feasible, if it's something you actually see yourself doing. Because thinking that you can do something the way I used to think that I can be a medical doctor and actually doing it are very different things. So then during your search for internship, it's going to be hectic and it won't be very easy sometimes. But one direction would be um, to go through online searches and checking out all these different institutes that are out there and the things that are happening within these institutes. Usually their websites would have information or profiles on different work going on or scientists that are in that institute and what their focus is on. So sometimes aside from just having your CV and writing a cover letter and dropping it at the entrance of a random research institute, it actually gives you a better, a sort of oomph when you have more content or you've done more research in your work. So then you should ideally go through, okay, so this research institute deals with malaria. So which interesting scientist is there? Is there a contact address there? Can I talk to them through email? Write them an email, tell them your interests or your intentions, and most often than not, they would be willing to bring in a student because actually with scientists, I feel like mentorship is a key part of their responsibilities that they welcome, but this is dependent on the supervisors I've worked with. They're often very open to mentoring students and they're usually very impressed with students that take initiative. So it's not just about dropping your envelope at the gate and hoping that things go through from there, although that works. But it's also being very intentional on, I know I want to work with this person and see how they do what they do and if it's something that I actually see myself doing in future. So then contact them and see if they'll respond. And in some cases also you have very specific dates of internship programs that are usually advertised. So students need to always be open to always be searching for opportunities. You cannot sit back and wait for opportunities to look for you. You have to be very active in the search. So always go to the website, especially with Cambridge Leafy. I know they usually have ads on maybe what's it called? Like after undergrad, there's this diploma or an internship program they usually advertise at a certain time, and it could be something worth applying. And usually it would lead up to other bigger opportunities because I know people who started at internship levels at certain research institutes, but that has built up to maybe a master's and a PhD and just being a very career wise a very gratifying opportunity. So and then sometimes students would go into internship expecting to get some sort of financial gratification out of it, but that shouldn't be the mindset because most of the internships, sadly, unfortunately, would actually be solely voluntary, and you have to go in there knowing that you're going to be working for practically nothing, and if you're lucky, you'd be able to get some peanuts out of it. But your main goal is to get this exposure. So every time you wake up, you just keep reciting it's all exposure is all you're going for and push yourself through that drive of getting exposure and knowing that this would help you to develop your career into something worthwhile that would be gratifying to you. So yeah, some institutes actually pay their interns, and it's something good that I've seen coming up in several institutes, and it's a good initiative, a motivational initiative for young students, so that they're not like, so internship there's no money, and then they stop having that drive to develop their career in research because they feel like it's not as gratifying as maybe starting up a business. So there's usually that small reward that some institutes offer interns, but you can't go into an internship with the mindset of you're doing this for the money. Actually just doing this for the exposure.
You had also mentioned something to do with how rejection, like you early on in your first year, you had tried. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So you have to be very assertive and have a very thick skin, because you won't always get a yes from your first application. You have to keep going and keep going. So I had mentioned that I had tried this internship, asking or applying for internships way earlier in my undergrad years, from first year during the long holiday, where you have to be at home for close to 3 months. And you're thinking, now I'm at home for 3 months, there's nothing I can do. It's not like after 3 months I have an exam. You're starting a whole new year, so you don't need to be cramming anything that you've learned from the previous year. So it's a time for you to be productive. So don't see it as a holiday, but a time for internship. So I had tried to apply for my internship at Cambridge in my first year, but I didn't get it, because they needed someone who had been in class more, who knew a bit more theory before you start working on the hands-on bit of things, or the practical bit of things. So I started quite early, and I think it's something that people should go into aiming to do that, where once you start undergrad, any opportunity, any free time you have to be doing it to work into how this free time is going to make you productive based on the career that you're choosing. Select areas where your field of interest is in. So I tried my first year, I didn't get it, and also in my second year I tried applying to Cambridge, and I don't know why my mindset was always on Cambridge. I guess it's because it was always on the news. Something has happened, some research, and there was something about Cambridge. So that was the first research institute that I knew of. So second year I also applied and I still didn't get it. And third year, during the long holidays, that's when I finally got it, and it was out of, I have submitted my CV and my cover letter, but then also I've gone into now trying to find out what scientists are there and what work is being done there, and how can I be able to link up with the scientists and show them that I'm interested, or I'm curious about the work that they're doing, and if they can let me in. So with my third year, that wasn't a formal internship. My formal internship was in my fourth year, where you get a letter from the university, and it's actually mandatory for you to have this period of internship. So I got an extra sort of exposure aside from the formal one, which was really good, because once I went back for now the formal internship, I realized there's some things that I was taught previously that weren't being taught now, and also the additional things being taught during my fourth year that I hadn't learned in my previous year. So
okay, that's an interesting addition. Also, you also talked about how you got from an unpaid internship that your parents were supporting, and IPR was also helping when it comes to transport, when they're dropping people at CBD, and also transitioning to a small stipend where Mercy was very instrumental in that. Can you talk more about that?
Oh yeah, that's true. So after my graduation, when I joined IPR, at first, like I
could
said,
you say what IPR is, by the way?
Oh, sorry, the Institute of Primate Research. So they solely work on primates. So their lab animals, or the lab models are generally monkeys or baboons, and they do work on different tropical diseases and some neglected diseases, and some of the diseases that affect like wild animals. So when I joined IPR, immediately after my undergraduate, because I knew I wanted to do a master's, but I didn't know what the master's I wanted to do would be in, I ventured into wanting to get some more exposure, and that's how I landed in IPR. And I mentioned that getting into IPR, it was sort of a blessing, or I was lucky because the time I was applying was the time when not a lot of students were applying. It was an off-peak season, and one scientist needed some help in the lab, and I had this exposure at Cambridge where my CV is saying I have 6 months internship experience doing this and this and this at Cambridge. So I joined IPR that way during an off-peak season, and I was lucky enough to work with one specific scientist, Dr. Mbaisi, who was working on zoonotic diseases in baboons. So she had a lot of work going in, and that's why I was saying that it's very important when you're choosing a place to go to. You want to go to a very active lab that you're constantly working, you're constantly pushing yourself. You're not going and just sitting there. So with Dr. Mbaisi, she was just starting off this project, this really interesting project on baboons, and she had a couple of experiments that she needed to do. And I think she was doing her PhD at the time. And once I joined, she took me in, and for the first couple of months, and actually I'm very grateful that it ended up being some sort of argument where she was giving me some stipend. But the first few months, we weren't getting, I wasn't getting any sort of financial assistance. But what's very good about IPR is that because it's in the outskirts of town, it's a bit far in Gong, they have this bus or transport system where you get picked from the CBD and you're taken to IPR, and then in the evening they drop you off at the CBD. So that helped with the transport logistics, because then it would have been really expensive. And during that time, having very supportive parents, they were able to they were patient enough to help me venture into this internship, knowing that I wasn't going to get anything and it wasn't very sustainable, but the focus was the skills that I'm getting from it and what it meant for my career otherwise. So then after a few months, once I had picked up most of the skills that were needed for Dr. Mbaisi's project, and once she was confident that I was able to work independently, that's when she then gave me more responsibilities, and now I would spend like whole days just working on samples, doing experiments and trying to see how they come out. And from there, then she saw that she could give me some sort of small stipend to take me through the day by day expenses, and that what was enough for me. And I think I was very grateful for that. It wasn't something that I expected. It wasn't something that I intended to get. It was something that she saw fit to offer me, and I was actually very surprised. And it doesn't matter how much it was, just the fact that she was able to, see that, be that, I don't know. I think it was a bit motivational, a bit, you're given that push, and you're like, okay, I'm doing this experiment. Apparently, I'm good at it. So she needs, so that's how it was.
Shout
but
out to
also,
her.
I mentioned how supportive she was, Dr. Mbaisi was. Like the first few months when I wasn't getting anything and I wouldn't be carrying lunch, and she would offer her lunch to me and share it with me. That was very, very thoughtful of her. And it's the little things that really stick with you, like that small apple that she offered me when I was working in the lab. They push you to work better. To push. And also, aside from that, I had mentioned
about your getting to your masters.
Getting into my masters, trying to figure out the masters that I want to do. That was from the experience that I got from IPR. Already I had gotten the exposure to lab work, what all of that entails, and now I just needed to figure out what masters I wanted to do from everything that I had from all the experience or the exposure that I had gotten. And also Dr. Masi is one of the people that, aside from my family, she's one of the people that also pushed me to go for my master's, because and it was very selfless of her, because by the time that she was pushing me to go for my master's, I had already gotten so much skills or exposure from her, and the experiments that I was doing they were running very smoothly, but they weren't done yet. And she still needed me. It's not that she didn't need me, but she felt like she needed to let me go for me to grow. And that was a wonderful aspect of our relationship that God fixed with me.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so selfless. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd sit with her and we'd talk, and she'd talk about what she did because she's actually a vet doctor, and she'd talk about her PhD, and she'd give me all these opportunities and advice, and just give me the push, or just showing me how important it is to like keep going, and her selflessness when it came to now letting me go. That was really good, and I had forgotten to mention that. And also when it comes to growing in research, the fact that she allowed me to be able to, so I wasn't just going into the lab doing things and handing her results. It was always a sort of conversation where we are talking about, so we are trying to see if this zoonotic disease suppresses immunity in monkeys, but we've been trying to test it like this, and the results are like this. What do you think this means? So she gave me room to analyze the results and give my conclusions based on it. And just giving someone that opportunity, it's not because she doesn't know what the results mean. She wants to push me to think scientifically, so that I know that science does not just involve going into the lab and leaving. It involves actively thinking about the things you're doing, setting out, knowing the objectives that you've set for the day, and what results are saying based on the experiments that you set up.
Like, that's very instrumental, like, to grow a scientist, don't you think?
Yeah.
Then,
and at first, once you're just a student out of university and you haven't had that exposure, like scientific thinking, it's a lot of pressure, not a bit of pressure, but being put on the spot, you're like, oh, so now I'm supposed to be thinking scientifically. But then it's good exposure, being thrown into the waters, knowing that this is a big aspect of science that you need to constantly be thinking about. You're not there to work as a machine. You're not a robot. You're active thinking. That's very key.
Then you had also mentioned about what your other classmates did when looking for internships, just for someone to think about that too.
Oh, yeah. So when it comes to internship, there were several different places that my classmates went to, and this was, I think it was pushed by the opportunities that were available at the time, because it was at that point it was mandatory for people to go for internships, but also people were driven by, they knew what they wanted to do, and they targeted specific institutes because they knew these institutes worked on specific areas of research that they were interested in. So aside from Kemri, we had some students that went into clinical research, and they went to Kenyatta Hospital to work in the lab. Some went to Kevevapi, I think that's a vaccine institute. Sure.
Yeah.
We had some going to agricultural research institutes like Calro. We had some going to ILRI. Some went to some actually also went into labs in the university aside from Kenyatta Hospital, and some went to KEBS. There's some people who are actually, when it comes to career-wise, they want to go into industry, not academia or not research. So some of my classmates were able to get attachments at camps. So it was a very interesting and diverse group of students going to different places.
Okay.
So the opportunities are there, and the research institutes are also quite a number. You just need to, for undergrads looking for internships, you just need to be very intentional in your search.
Yeah, and also reach out apart from just applying.
And also reach out,
Yeah. So you had also mentioned the women's influence, like you're coming from a school where you're just two out of, and we talked about the 2%. 2%, is it 2% or 1%? I don't know. Of you, or is it 1%? I think it's 1%, 2 out of 18. 1 point something.
2%.
Yeah. So you also mentioned that you coming from, you're just two women in class, then coming to this space where you're seeing the main women, when people are women. You had also mentioned, like in Camry, like the main women were women at the same time. Also, now this is in IPR, and the when you're interacting, people you're interacting with who are up there also women. And you also mentioned, I think you had already talked about your masters and how someone like Roslyn, also a woman in that. Like, could you talk about more about that? Like the women, even you talked about your mother. Can you just talk about that?
So coming from a class of very few ladies, and also I forgot to mention that 99% of our lecturers were actually men. So it was a lot of, you're not getting any female figures in school. So coming out of that, you're not sure what you're going to see in the field. But I was able to get to link up or get exposure or trained by very strong female figures, starting up from Camry, where I met Dr. Damaris Matoke and Mrs. Lucy. I've been raving about them so much, but those two were very instrumental into now driving my passion and knowing that, oh, so this isn't just a field for guys. Guys are not overwhelming us. We also have that power and drive to actually be able to come up despite the challenges and the setbacks that we got. So coming from a school where we weren't so many ladies, and then meeting this very assertive, very strong-willed and empowered women that just constantly inspire you, and when you're looking at them, you're looking up to them, and you're like, this is the kind of person I want to be. So that interaction is very inspiring, and I was lucky enough to come from now Camry being mentored by Dr. Damaris and Mrs. Lucy and Dr. Milka, and then coming to IPR and now working under someone who was very key in my path to starting my master's, and who's also a lady, and then meeting other ladies also in the tropical infectious diseases department, where now I met Dr. Lucy Ochola, who was working on malaria, which is something that I've already now figured it's something I want to do based on my work at Camry. So just meeting her, and also the interactions that we have, the conversations, also sort of overhear when she's talking to other scientists or during presentations, and you're seeing these very strong women who have worked really hard to get where they are. They're pushing you as a student who's still trying to figure things out, and they're letting you know that it's possible. It's not easy, they have worked hard to get where they are, but it's possible, and it's very inspiring and strengthening. And I had come up from that, and then going to masters, where I also again met really um inspiring and intelligent women, especially in coding, in computer programming, where we talked with Dr. Morik and Dr. Roslyn Masharia, and very brilliant minds, and they were also very very young, and you like these are practically my age mates, and how their minds are working, where they are right now, and being doctors and all these programming things, very technical things, and they were always very willing to help us to get better at what we were doing. And it's the sacrifices that these female figures make that actually also deeply motivate us. So like with our lecturers, I had mentioned about them sacrificing their time just to make sure that we got a particular aspect on a topic, especially with coding or with statistics. They would sit there with us, or maybe late into the night or on weekends. They would actually offer themselves to come during the weekends to teach us, especially when it comes to like things that they thought that we were struggling with, and just having ladies that knew the struggles that we were facing, because with Dr. Morik and Dr. Roslin, they had gone through the entire program in Sebib. So them knowing the experience that they went through, and them understanding that this is the help that maybe these students need, and them sacrificing all their time for that, it was very refreshing. And I think just seeing that also just keeps motivating students to know that you can't give up, you have to keep going, you have to keep pushing, and it's possible, and you have this very strong support system. Because back in the past, people didn't have that kind of support system. Probably they'd be looking up, and all they would see would be uh men scientists, male scientists, and very few female scientists. But now we're in a point where we, females have actually been really empowered enough, and you're seeing them in this really high positions, especially in science, where people in the past used to think that science was meant for guys. But now we've moved into this whole new world where women are really thriving in science, and it's very refreshing to see and very inspiring.
Talk about Florence Angango.
My mom. Yeah, I think before we even talk about all these ladies that I've been so blessed to meet throughout my journey, the one lady that it started from is Mrs. Florence Angango. So Mrs. Florence Angango is a very formidable force to reckon with. She is a very strong lady, very from when I was little, I've always been in awe of her and the passion that she's had with her career and her work. So I mentioned that my mom is a teacher, and she's also a principal in a high school. So she is very tender and motherly, but she's also very strict in a in the way principals need to be. But also her passions push her to go over and beyond the limit, and she's very hands on. So she's a person that I always say that to be a teacher, you need to be, it has to be a calling, and you need to be very patient, because you meet different students, different kinds of students every day, and you have to adapt the skills that you're using to teach to each and every student uniquely, but still be able to teach them as a group. So with my mom, for a very young age, I've always looked up to her, because I've seen her grow from being a young teacher, and moving up into being a head of department and a deputy principal, and now the principal that she is, and even the work that she puts into it. Uh, it's not like she pulls back anything. I feel like she gives her all, not just for her kids, her biological kids, but also for her kids at school. You see that she would do as much as she can to make sure that she has this hands-on approach with her students. So regardless of her being a principal and having to do administrative duties, she's also going to push herself to make sure that she knows what's going on in class with her students. Is there a student that needs any particular help? And it doesn't just have to be solely academic. If there's a student struggling with something that's non-academic but would affect the academics somehow, she'd be there for them. So she's a mother to everyone. She's a mother of all mothers. And her being a firstborn and actually taking care of her siblings, just seeing all that, the responsibility in her, and also her not wanting anything in return, just giving and giving constantly and being passionate about it. And I had talked about how excited she gets when she's talking about the lesson plans that she makes, when she comes up with this really explorative or unconventional ways of teaching, but she knows that it would spark the students' interest. So with that, it would ensure that the principle of the teaching sticks with the student. So whenever she's making her lesson plans and then she's talking about them, there's this way she just gets so bright eyed and she would smile and she's talking about how she's going to come up with this thing on the board and talk to and teach them through this sort of way, and how interesting it's going to be. Just that kind of passion, and it's that bright eyedness that made me want to want my career to be something that I would be that passionate about, that would get me so bright eyed as much as she does with her work. And I think I said that I might have landed there based on how bright eyed I get when I'm talking about mosquitoes. I could talk about mosquitoes all day and still not stop. But I guess I got it from my mama.